Jason Timpf, man, always good to see you. Are we in a simulation or augmented reality? This is wild. I don't even know what's going on anymore.
If you're a conspiracy theorist, it's hard to refute what's gone down in the last couple of days. The two biggest stars of the last era just immediately get paired with brand new superstars. And then the Luka Doncic thing, it's just no matter what type of mental gymnastics you try, it just made absolutely no sense. And so like I feel terrible for Mavericks fans. I feel like the conspiracy theorists have their thing to cling on to. But as an NBA fan, I don't know about you, Combo. I love basketball. I love the NBA. But it was getting a little stagnant. We hadn't really had much change around the league. We kind of knew what all these teams were already, you know? And I think, like, there's nothing wrong with that for the guys like us. But for the casual fans, I think they were getting bored. And I think they were just kind of tuning out till April every year, the last couple of years. And I think that this is the little, like, shake of the snow globe, so to speak, that'll re-engage some casual fans, which I think is fun. So
is there any merit to what the conspiracy theorists are saying?
No, absolutely not. I can't do it. I can't do it with that. And like, quite frankly, like, can you imagine if like the group that bought the Mavericks got like a call from Adam Silver or from some like shadow agent that's like representing Adam Silver, and they're like, "Hey, buddy, here's the deal. You're now going to call up Rob Pelinka and offer them Luka Doncic." It's just not realistic.
I mean, these guys are supposed to be friends. You don't think Pelinka would say, "Nico, are you sure? Like, really? Are you sure, Nico?"
I would kill to hear Rob's end of that phone conversation. Like, did he immediately get jittery? Did he start like skipping over his words? Yeah, okay, all right, fine. Or was he handling it all like a smooth operator? Because like, I just can't imagine how the conversation goes after. Like, here's the deal: we're thinking about punting on 25-year-old Luka Doncic. Like, it just is ridiculous. But it's so funny to me too, because like apparently Charlotte called him about Dalton Connect too, which is what kind of was the genesis of the Mark Williams deal. Now that one is a little bit more sketchy. I view the Mark Williams deal as much more of a risk. Mark Williams has a pretty tough injury history, and he's incredibly raw as a defensive prospect. Like, he's not even close to being ready to be a good defensive anchor. He's an unbelievable offensive player and rebounder, and he's going to be good for the Lakers, but like, in order for them to reach their ultimate potential, they need him to develop. So there's a little bit more of a risk there. And dude, they gave up like just about every other asset they have. To get that deal done.
I think you like Dalton and I like Dalton, but I guess they figured with the offensive firepower they now have, it's something that they could move on.
I like Dalton too, to be clear. Like, I think Dalton is like, there's a couple things that I really like about him. First of all, he's very big and strong at the position. So he gets to his spots pretty well. And I do think that like he'll knock down shots at a higher rate than he did for the Lakers this year. Like they kind of had him in and out of the rotation a bunch, and you could tell his rhythm was disrupted. And there were times where he was in rhythm where it was like, holy cow, this dude can really shoot the ball. So like, I think honestly, like, Charlotte's a perfect place for him. Go play with LaMelo Ball, go take a million shots, get 25 plus minutes a night, and learn how to play the game there. Even during the highest of highs with Dalton this year, and there were some highs, like he had some hot streaks where he just was like hitting shot after shot after shot. Even during the highest of highs, like, I just thought he was so sloppy in like the details of the game that I never saw him as a guy who could play in the meaningful kind of playoff rotation. So honestly, it's a timeline thing. And to Rob Pelinka's credit, he gave up on Max Christie and Dalton Connect, but he brought in a couple of 23 and 25-year-old young, like, really, really talented players. Obviously, Mark and Luka are in different classes, but I think it was the kind of move you had to make in order to bring in the type of talent that both satisfies the urgent need to try to compete with LeBron and Luka, but also to kind of keep a timeline, because, like, Gabe Vincent's 28, Vanderbilt's 27. These dudes are all in their mid-20s, man. And, like, LeBron, like, dude, is LeBron just going to play till he's 50? Like, that's the next question, right?
Yeah, I always said, I think, like, honestly, he will be able to be on an NBA court at like 45 or 47. I always believed that. I believed that for a while. Obviously, for the long term, we both know Luka on the Lakers is absolutely phenomenal. But for this specific year, what does the playoff outlook look like now compared to what it looked like during the LeBron AD time before the trade deadline?
I think that they have an obvious higher championship ceiling. You know, I always talk about in the playoffs, like, what's your best unit? Like, do you have a unit that no one can mess with? So, for instance, like Boston had a good defense last year, and they could ratchet up and get stops. But like, what made Boston a champion was their offense was completely unguardable, and no matter who they ran into, they could drive and kick them to death. Even going back to Denver, it was their offense. It was just relentless at the end of games. They could just execute, get great shots, and beat teams. If you looked at that Lakers team with LeBron and AD, they had offensive potential. They could have games where their offense looked great. Even stretches where, like, statistically their offense performed great. Like, they were top 5 offense for the last half of the year last year. They were fringe right around number 10 this year for the most part. But, like, you could see in, like, when teams would ratchet up ball pressure, when they'd start switching screens so that you couldn't get downhill, all of a sudden you're like, oh, LeBron's a little old, doesn't have as much pop as he used to. AD has always been a frustrating offensive player. And then Austin Reeves, who I absolutely love, is Austin Reeves. He's not, a top-tier superstar. So, like, there seemed like there was a limit there. And then on defense, it's like when the Lakers won the title, that was their unit. The Laker defense was so damn good with Alex Caruso, with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, with LeBron James, Danny Green, and Anthony Davis on the floor. Nobody could score. Like, they would legitimately go on these runs where, like, they'd strangle the life out of teams, right? And then I'd even say that was the Milwaukee Bucks, too, in 2021. Like, I thought that was kind of their unit, was like Giannis just being an absolute world beater on the back line, right? And so as I look at this team, they have this obvious defensive shortcoming, but we don't have to overthink this. I think the Lakers have a chance to be the best playoff offense. Because, like, when you get into those playoff situations and things really grind down, it comes down to a combination of, like, who are your top-tier shot creators that can break the defense down, and do you have guys who can finish those plays with the advantages that the stars create? And as you saw last night, and as you continue to see as of late, like, the Lakers have a lot of guys like Rui, like Austin, like Gabe, who can kind of, like, make a play off the bounce. And then they've got some spot-up guys, too, like Dorian Finney-Smith, knockdown spot-up shooter, right? You add in Luka, which will even generate more off-ball opportunities for LeBron. They just have a great combination of shot creation talent and play finishing talent. Mark Williams is, as you guys know, like one of the best catch and finish guys around the rim in the league. Just has like really good hands, insane standing reach. So I look at this team as a team that should be able to score regardless of who they play in the postseason, which I think is a strong foundation. So then it comes down to, can they get stops? And, like, there will be issues. Like, yeah, there are going to be lineups out there where, like, Mark Williams and Luka and Austin are out there and they score 1 million points, but they also give up 1 million points, right? But as we've seen, like, dude, their small ball looks have been awesome in the last couple of weeks. And so, like, if it gets to game 5 of a pivotal playoff series, I see it being like Luka, LeBron, and Austin with like Dorian Finney-Smith and Vando basically playing as the offensive center, screening and rolling into space. And I think they're going to go down small. I don't think they need to depend on Mark Williams in a big spot. The only thing I would say, though, is I think this is true about all teams in the Western Conference, but they are going to be vulnerable to a team like Denver, who just has a mammoth human being like Jokic who could really chew up their front line. And they're going to be in a situation where Denver probably can't guard them, but they probably can't guard Denver. And so that's going to be tough. I don't view them as a top-tier contender. I need to watch them play. Like, I don't know about you, Convo, but like I just want to see it for a little while.
Yeah, I think that's what's getting lost in all this. We're going to get to see LeBron and Luka play basketball together.
Yeah, dude. Okay, were you pulling your hair out when you were listening to everybody talk about whether or not they could play together?
I mean, they're two of the highest IQ guys ever and two of the greatest passers basketball has ever seen.
And most importantly, like, one of the big things that happened over the course of the last couple of years that everyone's glossing over is that when they started building around D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves, LeBron has been doing a ton of work as a screener. Like a ton. Like, if you look earlier in his career, it was just not really something he did, and we all knew he'd eventually be good at it because of his skill set. But like, he's an incredible screen and roll player, and so like and LeBron for a couple of years now has been like a knockdown 3-point shooter, like in catch and shoot situations. And so I look at it at a really basic level. Like, when LeBron or Austin are running action, like, yeah, Luka is a guy that can struggle sometimes with spot up shooting. But I would just, when Luka's on the floor, I'd run through him heavily. And then Austin and LeBron, I know, can play off the ball. And then there's also the staggering element where it's like every single Lakers lineup is going to have either Austin and LeBron and Luka, or Luka and Austin. that's just a lot to deal with. Like, dude, Austin's been like a 20 point per game, 50, 40, 90 guy for like over a month now. Like, he's just absolutely cooking it. Even last night he couldn't make a shot to save his life, but he just kept getting to the foul line, made some big plays late in the game, a big bank shot, a big assist, a couple of big contested rebounds. Like, Austin's just a gamer, dude.
Yeah.
And I'm just, dude, this is the last thing I'll say about it. Braun looks maniacally locked in, which
you seen him screaming at Luka? That was funny.
Dude.
Yeah.
Dude, I haven't. I watched it in 2020. I watched it the next year, the year he hurt his foot, and they ended up losing the first round. But like 2022 with Russ, 2023 with Russ, and then even the Western Conference Finals team going into the last couple of years, you could tell LeBron like doesn't really think that team could win. You know, and you could tell it was just kind of in his body language. He had all these moments where he just looked defeated. And now I look at him and he looks like a dude who's like, I smell a chance here. Like, I smell blood in the water. I think I can get a trophy. And like, I have seen a guy in the Clippers game and the Warriors game that looks like a maniacally locked in LeBron. The same LeBron, by the way, that rode that maniacal competitiveness to being the best player of his era. So like, I'm excited about that.
I think you're right about the mindset. And I would also say about the skill set is he's more skillful than ever before.
Absolutely. His shooting is incredible. The screen and roll game. You know, as the game has changed too towards this 5-out motion concept that so many teams are running so much more, really just it's more just like a lot of like sophisticated off-ball action and guys like slipping in and out of screens trying to beat switching. And like LeBron was born to play that style because he's just such a good passer.
Right.
And he's just that guy that can operate out of the top of the key. I mean, we watched this with Team USA, right? And so like LeBron was always going to develop into this like type of, you know, extended career Draymond Green, but like on steroids kind of guy. And that's the role that he's going to play on this particular team. Did you see the quote last night? He's like Luka and Austin are going to have the ball. He's like, I'll have the ball sometimes.
Yeah.
But they're gonna need him to play defense though. That's an important detail here.
Draymond that could just drop 40 whenever they want is a good player, right?
42, 17, and 8. Like, dude, that's obnoxious. Like, Luka got traded to the Lakers, and LeBron's like, I'm just going to put up Luka numbers to show him that I can do this.
Unbelievable. Well, you mentioned Draymond, so let's shift to the Warriors. We could shift to Jimmy to the Warriors, and obviously they want to maximize what's left of the Steph Curry timeline. What are your thoughts on, and what does this mean for the Warriors moving forward? I even heard your guy Carson on Nerd Sesh. He said it takes them from like the 11th best team to like the 9th. I think it makes them a little bit better than that, right? I mean, it's Jimmy Butler.
Yeah. And I always they're a playoff type of team where it's like we're in a big playoff game and it's Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond are all on the court together. Like, and that is a real upside, right? I'm just glad they stopped being rational about this because like there was a rational side. The rational side is like Steph is clearly not as good as he used to be. Draymond's clearly not as good as he used to be. This team doesn't have enough talent. Let's just be a bad basketball team and save all of our assets. Like, that's the rational side of it, right? I look at it more in an irrational way, which is that, like, you're clearly headed towards a rebuild no matter what. Like, Jonathan Kuminga is not a foundational star. Sorry, but the Jonathan Kuminga, Brandon Podziemski Warriors in 3 years are going to be a play-in team at best. They are not going to be a consistently good team in the Western Conference. So, like, you don't have this, like, foundational piece. Like, if you had a foundational piece, like a young 23-year-old, like, future MVP, yeah, then you could argue that they need to wait and not do anything crazy. But they're headed for a tank job no matter what. So, like, if you're going to go for a tank job and you've got one of the 10 best basketball players in the history of the game on your team, you might as well be fun and give them one last chance before you blow it up. And for the record, draft compensation went out the door. They managed to hold on to Kuminga and Moody and Pods. Like, I mean, they did hold on to their young talent. But, like, here's the thing. You lose some draft compensation. Sounds all scary. Here's the thing. Maybe this all goes up in flames. Maybe they win a playoff series or two, and you get to have a couple more Steph playoff moments. But maybe they lose in the first round. Maybe they lose in the second round. Let's just say they lose in the third round. Let's say it's like, oh, we're fun. We make it to the Western Conference Finals and we just get smashed by the Thunder or something like that. You do it again next year, and then eventually when these guys age out, you trade a couple of good role players on your team that don't fit into your big picture goals, and you recoup draft picks. Like, this is such a proven process. Like, you trade draft picks to be good. When the window is over, you get rid of the role players on that group that no longer serve the purposes of what you're trying to accomplish. You send them off to contenders for first-round draft compensation, and then you start the process again. Like, it's just one of those things where, like, of course they're not a top-tier contender. They're probably not even a second-tier contender. But you've got Steph Curry on your team. You're destined for a tank job anyway. Why not just give it a shot and just be like, hey, you know what? We had the ninth best player in NBA history on our team, or fifth best player, sixth best, wherever you have Steph ranked. I think I'm like 6th or 7th. You have one of the top 10 players in NBA history on your team, and at least you can go to bed at night and saying, as the GM of the Warriors, I gave Steph Jimmy Butler at the end of his career so that he had a shot.
Yeah. No, it's important also to have a fan base to give them something to be excited about, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
That's like, it's opposite of what Nico did, you know?
Exactly. Like, you could be mediocre Warriors and then tank, or you can be better than mediocre Warriors and then tank. So that's kind of the way I look at it. And like, do we really think that?
It's ring culture too. It's like, oh, they're not going to win a championship either way. That's not the only thing. It's a business.
It's not the only thing.
Yeah.
Dude, I'll give you an example. Like, when I look back at the 2023 Lakers, that team was not good enough to win the title. They got smashed by the Nuggets. They literally got swept, right? Anthony Davis got just absolutely demolished by Nikola Jokic. Team wasn't good enough. I have some really fun memories from that playoff run. Do you remember LeBron's and one against Dylan Brooks in Game 4? Yeah. Do you remember LeBron, do you remember D'Angelo Russell hitting like all those huge threes in Game 4? He had a game winner in Game 1 against the Warriors. D'Angelo Russell did. Lonnie Walker in the jumpers he hit over Steph in Game 4 of that series. I thought Game 6 against the Warriors, LeBron was insanely good. I remember in Game 4 against Denver in the sweep where LeBron was like, I'm not getting swept, and he had 30 points in the first half. Like, there are some memories from that run. And, like, in a weird way, like, LeBron was on a broken foot in that run. Like, when I look back at LeBron's career, I'm going to look back and be like, you know what was a fun playoff run? Was the 2023 one when they made it to the Western Conference Finals. Like, it's not all win or bust, to your point. Like, even just like look back at the Warriors, like 2019 when they lost to the Raptors. You know what was a really fun moment in that playoff run? Game 5 in Toronto when Kawhi went crazy at the end and it looked like he was going to end the series. And then Steph and Klay were like, nope, we're not done yet. And Klay hits a couple of huge threes. Steph hits a huge three. And then I think Andre Iguodala hit. I can't remember what it was, but they hit like 4 threes in a row and they stole that game and sent it back to Golden State for Game 6. Yeah. And then, of course, Klay Thompson ends up getting hurt, and it ends up not mattering. But, like, that's a fun memory from that era. And that's my thing is, like, would you agree that there's a certain amount of responsibility you have when you're holding on to one of the greatest players in NBA history? Would you agree?
Yeah, especially if they look like they could still play close to their prime, even if they're not in their prime.
Well, and that's the thing with Steph. Like, I think there's a couple of realities. He's not as good as he used to be. Like, I've had a lot of Warriors fans be like, oh, this roster sucks. And I'm like, yeah, you know what other roster sucked? The 2021 roster. And Steph was absolutely frying, like, everybody in the league. Like, I still remember in, like, February, March, it was like you just see on Twitter, you'd be like, Steph's going off again. And you turn on the game and he's got 42 and he's hit like 5 threes in a quarter. And it's like Steph was clearly not the same player this year that he was in years past. But there is some truth to the fact that, one, the roster is making it difficult on him because he has to take a ton of bad shots. They do not have the talent to float things offensively unless he's creating everything. And then, two, he is still being guarded like Steph. And I think that that's an enormous value. The game plan against Steph is still prioritizing him in every single action, which is leaving dudes open, slipping out of switches, blitzing him in ball screens, or at least meeting him on the level. Like, teams are guarding him like he's Steph Curry. And so if he's being guarded like Steph Curry and he's still getting an efficient 23-something points per game, and you bring in a Jimmy Butler, you defend the way that they're capable of defending. I thought they were really good defensively in the second half against the Lakers last night. They're a top 10 defense. They've been a top 10 defense all year.
And speaking of defense, Wiggins is a great defender, but Jimmy is truly a special defender, and that gets lost in translation.
Absolutely. Like, Combo, the last time Jimmy played in a playoff series was Denver in the finals. And game 2 of that series, if you remember, they won in Denver. And Jimmy was on Jamal Murray and did an incredible job on Jamal Murray in that game. And, like, again, I actually would agree with you that, like, I think Wiggins is an underrated defender in a lot of ways. And I would actually argue that in the regular season, Jimmy's probably not going to be as good on that end as Andrew Wiggins is.
That's just engagement. Right.
Exactly. And age and motor. And by the way, Jimmy needs to save his legs for April, for the record.
Right.
But like when you get into a postseason series, do I think there's a massive gap between Jimmy and Andrew on defense? No. If anything, Jimmy's probably a little better. And then 2, like this is a crazy stat for you. Andrew Wiggins in his entire career has like, I think 14 games with 7 assists. Mm-hmm. And Jimmy had 15 games with 7 assists just last season. So like an entirely different level of playmaker, an entirely different level of like matchup hunter. A guy like one of the most successful actions for the Warriors this year has been Steph Andrew Wiggins 2-man game. You know, it's going to be a lot better, the Steph Jimmy Butler 2-man game. So I mean,
it's so Jimmy could like literally put a team on his shoulders and take you to the finals. It's proven.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so like another way of looking at it is like, okay, so Golden State's probably going to be the 7 or 8 seed, right? Like they have an outside shot to get up to 6, but like I think they're like 3.5 back or maybe 2.5 back of the 6 seed right now. But they're going to be the 7 or 8 seed. Ideally, you fight to get up to 7. And then it's like, hey, can we beat Houston or Memphis? And like, do I think Golden State could beat Houston or Memphis in a series? Yeah, they beat Memphis multiple times this year. They beat Houston multiple times this year. So like, they're absolutely capable of doing this. It's just like they're obviously a long shot threat, but like I'd rather have long shot threat Steph, who's playing in maybe 1 or 2 meaningful playoff series, than let's just miss the play-in entirely and just let Steph rot for the rest of his career out there in the Bay.
So there's a lot of talk about the Draymond Jimmy, and then you might have another non-spacing big man that fit. But to me, Jimmy is so much of a high IQ player. He creates gravity in itself. Just because he's not a catch and shoot. And by the way, Jimmy's shooting like 43% on threes, I think.
Standstill threes, he knocks him down insane. Like, dude, on standstill catch and shoot threes, he's shooting over 50% the last 2 years. Over 50%.
Exactly. So I have no concerns about the fit with him, Draymond, and a non-spacing big at all, because the Warriors are an IQ read and react type team, and Jimmy has such a high IQ, and it fits that side of the ball perfectly.
Absolutely. And quite frankly, like I think the Warriors are a little underrated in terms of their role player talent. Like, yeah, if you ask Pat Spencer to be the secondary shot creator on your bench unit, like he's going to show some lumps. He's going to shoot some air balls. He's going to get roasted by Markieff Morris the way he did last night. If you ask Brandon Pajemski to be the primary shot creator in your bench unit, like you're going to be frustrated as he misses shots. But like if you ask those guys to play small roles, like Moses Moody got a bunch of wide open threes with the starters yesterday, and he was hitting them. Moses Moody can hit wide open threes.
He's a winning player. Moses
exactly.
Yeah.
If you keep all these guys in more achievable roles, like hey, if Buddy Hield is just taking 8 or 9 shots a game that are all pretty open instead of like 11 or 12 that are all smothered, like he's going to shoot a higher percentage. That's just how basketball works. And so the way I look at it, you're taking, instead of having like the Warriors' original model was like Steph is the top, and then it's like Andrew Wiggins, Buddy Hield, and Dennis Schroeder are like this hybrid combined secondary star. And all 3 of them are super inconsistent. Jonathan Kuminga is just as likely to score 12 or fewer points this season as he is to score 20 or more. Like he has 11 games of each. There was so much inconsistency there. Now you're bringing in Jimmy, and like I talked about with Steph, like is Jimmy going to put up 27 a night on 62% true shooting? No. But what Jimmy does is even on the nights that he's not shooting well, he's going to generate advantages, draw 2 to the ball, make nice kick-out reads, just make plays like all superstars do. And so there's now going to be 2 super high floor offensive players at the start. And now you can have this smorgasbord of inconsistent role players that like, hey, Buddy Hield had 17 tonight, you know, like Jonathan Kuminga had 28 tonight. That's great. You know, like, whereas like in the past, the inconsistency there was what was killing them. And now they just have more consistency.
As you know, NBA tough business. Khris Middleton gets moved. And my thing has always been the NBA is more about meshing skill sets and tendencies than slotting positions, if you will. So obviously, Khris Middleton in his prime was a better surgical half-court scorer, but they didn't have Dame at that time who could fill in some of that role or a lot of that role. You bring in Kuzma, he's younger, he has championship experience. It seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, I saw a lot of pessimism from Bucks fans, and I think there's a couple reasons for that. I think one is like they are overvaluing Khris Middleton a little bit. And for the record,
at this point of his career.
At this point. And by the way, I actually agree with some of the things that they're saying. Like when I watch the Bucks this year, even when Khris isn't dropping 20-something points, which he's done a few times in the last couple of weeks, although it's been in losses or against bad teams. But Khris Middleton's ball handling, like his ability to just kind of like run action and generate little advantages here and there for people, has really greased the wheels for them on offense. Kyle Kuzma brings a lot to the table, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, but Khris Middleton is not the level of, Kyle Kuzma is not the level of ball handler advantage creator that Khris Middleton was. So they will miss that. Here's the thing, though. As long as Kyle Kuzma starts playing winning basketball again, which is an important qualifier there because he's been playing in Washington for a few years. Kuzma's last year in Los Angeles, he had become a really good role player. He's an excellent defensive rebounder, like just a really good defensive rebounder, which is a value add on a team with Khris Middleton and Taurean Prince, who are both not very good defensive rebounders. So they immediately become a better rebounding team. And then, you know how we were talking earlier about the way teams are guarded, or players are guarded? Kyle Kuzma is a career 54% true shooting. The best he's ever shot from three is 36% his last year with the Lakers. But that dude gets shots up. He is, in his career, a 17 field goal attempt per 36-minute player. Even when he was a role player on the Lakers, he was taking 13 field goal attempts
an underrated
per 36 minutes.
That's an underrated skill in the NBA. Yeah,
I agree. And most importantly, it actually leads to teams guarding him. Because here's the thing. Kyle Kuzma has scored 25-plus points in a game, something like, it's like 93 or 94 times in his career. He's got 11 35-point games in his career. Kyle Kuzma, if you leave him open, might just get hot and shoot you out of the gym. So, like, you have to account for Kyle Kuzma as a scorer. And so, when you combine all that, if he can get the winning traits back, he's still a good rebounder, but if he becomes the type of rebounder he was with the Lakers, he was a very good help side defender with the Lakers, playing passing lanes, rotating to shooters on the weak side. If he can do that stuff and bring just like a scoring threat at the three, not to mention the size, like Kyle Kuzma's big. And if you put him next to Giannis and Brook, that's just a really big lineup that can kind of like provide more backline size behind Dame and whoever it is that they play at the two at any given moment. So like I look at it as a deal that has real upside. It's a risk because Kyle Kuzma might just come in and be a loser. But if Kyle Kuzma comes in and he embraces the role and gets back to what he was with the Lakers, I think he's just a better basketball player than Khris Middleton at this point in his career.
Yeah, it could fall into the Andrew Wiggins, Aaron Gordon type thing, right? You got these guys that are really talented. They get in a winning situation. They become winning players.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. Like what I was like, there's this thing that happens when you're a fan of a player. He either makes a lot of winning plays and you love watching him, or he's constantly making mistakes and it's infuriating watching him, or a mix of the two. Towards the end with Kyle Kuzma, I enjoyed watching him. I was like, it's been really cool to watch Kyle Kuzma develop into like a winning basketball player. Yeah, and so like that's the thing is like if that's still in there, and I think it is. Like this is the other thing too, Combo. Like I'm a big believer in like the rising tide that floats all boats. Like when you have Giannis on your team, like there's a certain amount of accountability that comes from that. Like you know how hard it is to be lazy when you're the superstar of your team is competing. It's hard because you feel like you're letting him down. So like I'm hoping that Kyle Kuzma just gets swept up in the Giannis experience and gets back to that level. You have a look on your face like you don't believe it.
No. I believe it. I know we're talking a lot about Luka and LeBron, but I'm thinking about like if some of LeBron's work ethic, even 10% of LeBron's work ethic rubs off on Luka. I mean, man, that could be different. Because I mean, Luka, the way Luka is, and we all hear the reports, he's in the MVP considerations every year. He doesn't have to be Kobe. He doesn't have to be in terms of work ethic. Like, if he just gets a little bit of that, man, it's dangerous, man. It's dangerous.
Dude, I was talking about this on my show last night. Like,
and rest in peace, Kobe, by the way.
You rest in peace, Kobe. When I was watching the game last night, I was literally sitting there thinking, because I was like, LeBron is so obviously like on another level of engagement right now than he has in years. And I remember sitting there thinking, I was like, he is clearly benefiting from Luka in terms of belief. But Luka is coming into this situation pissed off because of what Dallas did to him. And by the way, like, I don't care about how chubby Luka is. I don't care about whether or not his work ethic behind the scenes and taking care of his body is as good as some of these players and how good it needs to be. It was insulting what they did to him. He's 25. Like, Combo, I don't know about you, man, but like, I wasn't taking care of my body when I was 25, and and by the way, I wasn't a professional athlete. And like, yeah, you're right. There's a certain standard. Like, ideally, by age 25, you should be starting to, take care of your body. But like, remember Victor Oladipo when like one summer randomly he's like, dude, I got to get in better shape. And the next thing you know, Victor Oladipo is just absolutely jacked and just destroying people in Indiana, right? Like, that's the thing. Like it does click for people at different points. Even for me, like, I felt like I really clicked for me in terms of diet and care for my body last year when I hurt my Achilles. And I was like, dude, I don't want to break down. I need to take better care of my body. And obviously I wasn't a professional athlete, so I had different motivations, but you get the point. It's like it clicks for everybody at different points. And it was insulting what Dallas did, shipping him out in that situation and then burning him down on the way out. So like, Luka's super motivated. Now he's going as super motivated Luka into a locker room with either the best or second best basketball player to ever walk the earth, as mentally engaged as he's ever been. Like, how do you not get swept up in that? Like, he just put up 42, 17, and 8. Like, do you think Luka can be a fat ass and like cut corners in self-care while LeBron is maniacally working 5 feet next to him or in the locker right next to him?
Think about what's going through Luka's mind too. You're saying LeBron's seeing maybe a chance for a championship. If Luka thinks, if I could beat the Mavs in the playoffs and win a championship, what would that mean? That could be going through it, and he could get motivated like right at this point. That would be the craziest thing ever. Craziest thing ever.
I don't know how you could not be rooting for Luka at this point.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. This is like an album. Like, the Luka rollout has been amazing. Him doing like the LA side, he just seems so likable. Everybody's rooting for him now because it looks like he was done dirty. Like, the album Rollout is just amazing. It's amazing.
I love the dichotomy between like his off-court persona and his on-court persona, because like I was actually watching an interview of him this morning that was from before the game last night. So again, before LeBron drops 42, 17, and 8. And they're asking him some questions about LeBron. And he's like, yeah, LeBron has always been someone I looked up to. I'm excited to learn from him, blah, blah, blah. But at the end, the TNT guy asks him, he's like, so after all the reports that came out of Dallas, like, what are your thoughts on that? And he just has, you've heard Luka's interviews. Like, he's not projecting his voice. He's very quiet, little mumbly, obviously a little bit of a language barrier. And he's like, yeah, people have been saying things about me forever. Like, it is what it is, blah, blah, blah. And like, there's just this look in his eyes where I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I know he's like absolutely furious and just wants to murder these guys. You know what I mean? And like, and that's the part that I think is super exciting, is like, I think that a desperately motivated top tier professional athlete is one of the funnest things to watch in sports. Yeah. And I'm just super excited to see it.
And we've seen him take teams' hearts. We've seen it with the Suns. We've seen it with the Clippers in the bubble. Like, he's a guy who could literally take your heart and put it in his pocket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm so excited, man. Like, I just, the NBA got a little shakeup. We talked about the casual fans earlier, but even for guys like us, like, this is fun. Like, this is going to be fun. We got a bunch of new teams to cover. Like, I'm just excited, man. And dude, we had a couple of bad years with the conference finals and the NBA finals too. I have a feeling this year we're going to get better final rounds as well. And so like, I just think this is a great time to be, dude, it's a great time to be podcasting about the NBA, isn't it? Right?
No, it's amazing. Fox to the Spurs. What are your thoughts? Honestly, it's great, and I know you loved it, but I would have liked to see like Trey and Wemby or LaMelo and Wemby. I would have just because of the savant passing on offense. I know they're not
passing would have been fun.
They're not the winners that Fox seems like he is, or probably is, but it's like that would have been really fun with like Wemby as a lob threat and those guys just giving him like crazy passes.
There's no doubt that especially on the lob pass type of game, that'll be a difference. I think where I get excited is the flip side of that is like the pick and pop stuff. And like there's a closeout that occurs between the drop coverage big and the popping big in these ball screens when you run pick and pop. But like, let's pretend it's D'Angelo Russell. I'll just say Chris Paul. Let's pretend it's Chris Paul. When Chris Paul is running a ball screen, he's not screaming off of that ball screen with a bunch of downhill force. Like he's kind of slowly coming off the ball screen, right? So the closeout is just not as long of a closeout from the big when he's getting back to Wemby popping. De'Aaron Fox can come flying down those picks. And I just imagine, I haven't actually watched his first game yet. I'm excited to go back and watch the film, but I'm excited to watch Victor Wembanyama just get like these incredible pick and pop touches out above the break where he's just completely wide open. And I think he's going to do a lot of damage there. And like, frankly, like when things get really tight, dude, when things get tight in a postseason series, I always bet on athleticism. And I just think, I just remember even from the Warriors series, like De'Aaron Fox just has an ability to get to his spots in tough playoff environments that I think is super valuable. I think he fits Wemby's timeline really well. Even on the defensive end, like Victor Wembanyama is one of the best, like clean up the back line type of guys in the history of the NBA, if not the best. De'Aaron Fox is a like aggressive, try to force turnovers type of perimeter defender that gives up a lot of dribble penetration. And that like ironically is a perfect fit because as you know, Combo, ball pressure speeds up ball handlers.
Yeah.
It forces you to drive, but not on schedule because now you're just like, you're driving for the sake of beating the pressure instead of driving as part of a plan. And so I just imagine De'Aaron Fox pressuring the ball and like giving up dribble penetration, but like unplanned dribble penetration where Wemby's just waiting right behind him. I think it's such a natural basketball fit. I was calling for this trade as soon as the Kings started crapping the bed earlier this year. I was like, De'Aaron Fox would be perfect in San Antonio.
Yeah, I mean, Wemby changed the whole timeline for that team. There was pressure on the Spurs to make a move right now because they could be good right now because of Wemby.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that was kind of my point in the process was like, if you're Detroit and it's like, yeah, Cade's really good, but he's not like ready to lead a championship team, then you want to be slower about it. And like, they needed a secondary shot creator, and they got Dennis Schroeder, which I think is perfectly fine. Like Dennis Schroeder's cheap. Not going to affect your timeline at all, but like, hey, when Cade's off the floor, when Cade needs a rest, Dennis can run action. Like, perfectly fine, right? Yeah. But like, they didn't need to go get super aggressive on a trade because I still think Cade is like at least 3-4 years away from being able to like lead a championship team. Wemby is going to be a consensus top 6 player in the league, either by the end of this year or by like the beginning of next year. Like, Wemby is like ready.
I predicted this year was top 5. He would be top 5 by this year. We're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there. Like, I would say Tatum has been a little bit like Tatum's rise this year has been impressive, and I think he has kind of claimed that 5th spot behind the top 4 guys. But I think Wemby has a case to be 6.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like he's had these games this year that just don't make any sense. Like the one against Jokic in Denver. Dude, that game against Giannis the other night, that was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Giannis was like flummoxed by him. Like, it's crazy. So, like, I looked at it as, like, you can't just let Victor Wembanyama develop next to all these other young players that are going to obviously develop at a slower pace. And the brilliant thing about the trade they pulled off is the only young player they gave up was Trey Jones.
Yeah.
So, like, and they got a guard back. Like, they kept Steph Castle. They kept Devin Vassell. They kept Jeremy Sohan. They kept everybody. And you bring in this talent. And you have the ability to put together lineups with vets. Like in a big playoff series, they can go down with Fox, Castle, Harrison Barnes, like either Keldon Johnson or Sohan and Victor. And so like they have vet options, but they have young options, but they also have these 2 stars that fit their timeline. Like now they can just be fun as they give Wemby like a legitimate kind of wingman if they ever end up in a big playoff series.
You know what I was thinking about? You mentioned Schroeder, and it makes me think about Karis LeVert, Kyle Anderson, even Brandon Ingram. Guys are bouncing around that are really good at basketball because the NBA is just all about, can you find a niche or can you be a star player? And you could be great at basketball, but But if you don't fit one of those two categories, you could find yourself bouncing around, not really knowing where this guy's going to be from year to year.
Yeah, I feel like Brad Beal kind of fits into this mold too, even though he didn't get traded. Where it's like a star that's not good enough to be one of your stars, but is also not necessarily a great role player. It's a super interesting concept. And then even with the role player types, like it's weird role players. Like Dennis is just kind of small, and like Kyle Anderson can't shoot, and like there are things like that make those guys bounce around. I would say like Kyle Anderson and Dennis Schroeder are guys I would bet on because those guys are like legitimately very good at role player stuff. But yeah, like that.
Kyle is so good at basketball. Like he's really good at basketball. Yeah.
He's really, really good. And like he is one of my favorite defenders to watch in the league. He honestly was a great fit in Golden State because of his ability to kind of function as a passing fulcrum in action. But like you make a really interesting point because it's like you trade for Brandon Ingram. He's not a good enough shot creator to take you to the promised land. And if you put the ball in someone else's hands, he's not a very good off-ball player on either end of the floor. Bradley Beal, same sort of thing. In Washington, he can be your top offensive player while you're bad, but then he goes to Phoenix, and it's like all of a sudden it just shines a bright light on the fact that he's a terrible off-ball defensive player, terrible rebounder. Like, it's a problem. And, like, that's a really interesting point. Like, maybe the fringe star is now, like, the party in the NBA that is going to struggle to find a home. Because it's like you're gonna find yourself in situations where they're just on mediocre teams. Kind of like even Zach LaVine going to Sacramento. It's like we already know what that looks like, Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan together. But it's like those guys are not going to end up on good teams.
It's interesting because sometimes it could actually work in your benefit when it comes to accolades or even a payday. Like we look at Julius Randle. He could have took in his brain a role player route. Like, I don't think I'm going to be a star, right? Let me try and find an NBA niche. But he's like, no, I'm going to be a star. And he actually became All-NBA, and he got paid for it.
Julius Randle's another great example. The one thing I'll say about Julius Randle that's a little different than the other guys we talked about is he's legitimately so big and so strong that he was able to reach a level on offense that was kind of difficult for teams to handle.
Don't you think Ingram almost reached like an all-star, All-NBA level at one point?
I think Ingram is an interesting player because, like, that first round series against the who was it against? Was it against the? It was against Chris Paul, so it was against the Suns, right? And the Pelicans took him to 6 games, and Brandon Ingram was incredible in that series. When Brandon Ingram is healthy and playing a lot of basketball, meaning like he's been playing 20 games in a row for a month and a half. When he's in rhythm, he's such a good player. But ever since that series, he's been incapable of staying on the floor. And that is because like out of rhythm, Brandon Ingram, like the guy who comes back from injury and has only played 3 or 4 games, is just not very good. So like that's the interesting thing with Brandon is like I think there's like kind of like the idea of Brandon Ingram and then the reality of Brandon Ingram, and they're kind of far apart.
All right, let's end here. KD says no to the Warriors reunion. What are your thoughts? And what does that mean for KD? What does it mean for the Suns? And what does it mean for their relationship?
I wanted KD to go to Golden State. I thought he would have had a better chance to win there. Again, my theory with Golden State is they have lots of role players and just no shot creation talent. And so I thought KD would be able to kind of rectify that. I had heard from many sources, including some very close to KD, that he was really upset about how things went down. So I was a little worried that he would step in and nix it, and he did. So, like, it's unfortunate because according to Brian Windhorst and according to a bunch of other people, that deal was on the 1-yard line. They had a deal that sent KD to the Warriors and Jimmy Butler to the Suns, and just KD stepped in and nixed it. And so what's interesting about it is, like, I think it's defensible in the sense that, like, I think KD looked at Golden State and didn't think he had a better chance to win. Now, I would have disagreed with him, but, like, let's call it a marginal better chance to win. Even under that context, I respect KD's decision to be like, I don't want to move to go be maybe a little bit better on a team that I have some baggage with. So, like, I respected it. But, like, as a basketball fan, I wanted to see Steph and KD reunite.
It's a mess over there, to be honest. I mean, Bradley Beal said, I'm not going anywhere that's not warm. And he had all the power in the world because of the no trade clause. Now this thing with KD, they didn't get Jimmy Butler. It's like they're in limbo.
Yeah, it's a complete and total disaster combo. Like, I mean, I like Cody Martin. He's a useful athlete.
Not as bad as what the Mavs did, even though the Mavs are going to be way better this year. But, yeah, I see. It's a disaster, too.
Yeah, the Mavs are going to be fun on defense.
Philly, Suns, Mavs, it's like disasters, but all in their own way.
I saw
Daryl Morey is Mr. All In. You know what I'm all in on? Hoops Tonight. Tell them where they can find it. You like the segue, right? You like let them know where they can find you, Jason. I'm looking forward to next time too. You know, you're always welcome back on the show and talk soon.